So welcome to CS Office Hours, soon enough to be changed to a different name. Ethical dilemmas in CS for CS leaders and CSMs. That's our topic for today. And Guy Galon is co-leading with me. So let me stop sharing so we can see Guy. Guy,
Hello.
yeah, so wave and say hello. Do a
Hello,
quick
everyone.
introduction for us. Tell us about, who you are, what you've been doing, how you got interested in this topic.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Jan. And hello, everyone. My name is Guy Galon. And yeah, short introduction about myself. I've been in customer management for more than 20 years, I would say, 24. I built and managed global CS teams in enterprises and startups. And I think I enjoy the CS both from the practical side of things, being a VP of customer success, as well as contributing as much as possible to our community. By writing on LinkedIn, I do mentoring, I participate in webinars and also in office hours today. And on a personal note, I found, earlier in my career, the intersection between technology, people, and processes to be very fascinating for me. And I think this is where it led me to be in account management and customer management roles and customer success, of course. And I think this intersection actually creates a lot of challenges for us, and also challenging our professional integrity, which is what we will be talking today. And yeah, shortly about myself. And Jan, thank you very much for inviting me to CS Office Hours, and I'm sure we'll have insightful discussion today.
Yeah. And I actually first, well, I don't know, I might have known you before we were involved in CS Insider, but definitely also through CS Insider. And if you're not signed up for that, newsletter, CS Insider helps a lot of people who are transitioning into CS or CSMs. Especially, there's a lot of great guidance and materials and resources there. So be sure to check that out. All right, so let's get into the topic here. Let me share the screen. And we just have a couple of resources here today, but we will think about more and add more to it. But in terms of the topic, we're also really looking at integrity and balance in business, right? When we talk about because ethics sounds a little, vague and maybe even a little overwhelming. Like, am I ethical, or what are my business ethics? But when you think about like the integrity that you have, yeah, I think that's something you can really feel and it resonates. At least it resonates with me. So when you think about it, it can come up in a variety of different ways. And we all have some stories, so I'm looking forward to yours as well. But Guy, why don't you start by kind of talking about what you mean by customer stakeholders and the conflicts of interests that you've seen between
Yeah,
stakeholders?
of course. Maybe just one more comment about professional integrity. For me, it's basically, as any professional, acting according to our values, being consistent in the way we conduct ourselves. And I think in the context of customer success, eventually acting in the customer's best interests. And why I'm saying that, if we look at the, big part of our job, day-to-day job is managing stakeholders from different companies, from different markets, from different backgrounds. And of course, we will come to those cases where we need to kind of say to ourselves where we fit in this situation and what we're going to do. And we noted few, let's say, typical situations. One of them is conflict between stakeholders. When I say it could be also internally in your company, but I'm more leaning into, your champion and stakeholders in his or her own company. Maybe multiple stakeholders and they have different opinions, and someone is maybe under scrutiny. You are the vendor, you are the CSM. You may get stuck in the middle. And based on my experience, CSM, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't need to take a side or to pick a side and say, I only support my stakeholder or my champion, but we need to actually explain what is the right thing to do. We are the professional experts. We may answer questions. We may lead the way. We may share best practices. and try to kind of drive this conflict into a resolution, not by saying who's right and who's wrong, but generally representing the best practices that we would like to share with the customer. So at least on the conflict of interest, interest, I think that's, for me, the right way to act.
Right. Well, and you think about it, because we are customer facing, right? And our reputation then is something in our industry that when sometimes, because we're at that intersection between the customer and the company, or if we're high touch CSMs, we're very involved in understanding, you know, who all the different players are at a company. Sometimes then by working so hard at understanding who, you know, what the setup is at a company, we might start to really understand the politics of that company as well. So it's a question of, you know, where you draw the boundaries, right? And ensuring that you're able to, you know, continue doing business with the company, no matter how the politics play out, right? Because very often there can be huge changes in companies, and you want to be sure that you understand who all of the different folks are and you can work with all of them, as opposed to getting embroiled in their politics, right?
Exactly.
And yeah.
And they may move also to another company. You want to be known for your professionalism and, you know, and standing for your own opinion. And, you know, they also may change companies, and it's a small world, and you may find them in a different role in a different circumstances.
Right. And when you're talking about weak leadership and struggling teams, what did you have in mind in that?
I came across, again, it's more to do with the enterprise segment, but not only. When you just come across a team that is not performing, there is a certain piece of work that needs to be done as part of onboarding or as part of another part of your journey with the customer, and they just don't perform. They could be not motivated, maybe not trained, maybe not managed well, maybe your champion or the manager you work with is not strong enough within the team. And then again, it's a balance. To what extent you can continue to do what you do, and knowing that there might be risks here, not to make the customer successful or not go to the right way, in the right direction, or you need to give some guidance in a very soft way to the manager that you work with, or even to his or to her team, to be able to balance that. So that's another, let's say, professional integrity challenge that I came across.
And I know that for myself, when I was an individual contributor, there was a whole change in leadership, and yet the team was still the same. And I knew the whole history of the team. I knew everything that they were doing, you know, using our product, which was core to their business. Right. And now there was a new leader in, and I was trying to work with the leader and help him understand the history of things and help him get his footing and that sort of thing. But there was a balance. There was a certain point when he thought I sort of crossed the lines, like, well, I'm the leader here, I'll get to know it. But he didn't know anything at all about his team that I knew better right then, right? So it's like, how do you find, you know, a way to be helpful, you know? And so of course I backed up and I was like, oh no, of course, you know, I was just hopefully just trying to be helpful with some insights. I'm here for you, I'm a resource for you, I'm a partner to you, that sort of thing, right? But I mean, like, there can sometimes be a balance that you're trying to play when you're trying to be helpful, if you are a very high touch CSM. Or like stakeholders when they're resisting change, especially when you're looking at implementation. Sometimes in order to, you know, make progress, you literally have to throw somebody under the bus. You have to go to the decision maker and say, hey, I need these following things by this date. I'm not getting them from your team, right? So that they know, so that then they can go and be the heavy-handed person to say, hey, you've got to do this. This is a priority to us. Or then they make the decision and say, no, these other things are a priority. We're going to have to delay our dates, right?
Correct.
But it can feel like you're throwing somebody under the bus. And is that, you know, like,
if there's a stakeholder that resists a change, then the best method that I've come across is before throwing someone under the bus is try to just break it down to smaller kind of changes that are more manageable. Maybe, the big change or an integration or a new way of working is too much at the moment. So you kind of try to break it down to more meaningful, let's still deliverables that can be done. And then, that's one tactics. The other tactics as well is to go to the decision maker. Sometimes the stakeholder that resisted change was not part of your decision process, so they don't know enough. So maybe you need to train them a little bit and get them a little bit more comfortable with your solution.
Mm-hmm. Or moving on to sort of company and deliverables. There can be cases where, say, promises have been made, whether it's through the marketing process or in sales, that you actually can't deliver on, right? And then
Yep.
how do you negotiate and have those conversations so that then, the company looks, still has integrity, so that you still have integrity. There's a lot of balance to consider, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
I think the professional integrity here is, for example, not to point the finger to sales or marketing and say it's not my problem. I mean, we are in CS, we need to handle those kind of challenges. Um, there are cases where I will bring back sales to the loop just to make sure that we understand expectations, the promises, and so on. And I think for me, it's a way of acting professionally in front of a customer, and still balancing between, I'm working for this company. I'm not going to throw my sales under the bus and make the customer feel from day one that they were missold or we are just all over the place, which is not the experience that you want to start with.
And a lot of times people think, oh, well, sales has promised something that I can't deliver, and that's the only situation. I was in a situation once where on the marketing website, it literally said that onboarding could take as little as 20 minutes or up to 14 days. Well, most of the onboardings were taking a month, 2 months, 6 months. Part of why I was an interim leader there was to go in and fix some of these processes, right? And I was trying to talk to the marketing leader and say, look, we need to change this. This is setting all the wrong expectations, right? And she was like, no, this is such a great message. I want to keep this message up here. She wouldn't change it. So when then somebody comes in and they start onboarding, instead I would sort of break it down with them instead of saying, oh yeah, that was a bunch of BS. I hate the marketing person for having left that up on the site. I didn't say that. Instead, I got into tactical with the customer and said, well, let's talk about your onboarding in particular. Do you have these things ready to go? Those things ready to go? And talked about, like, what does it look like you can do for your onboarding? Let's customize this to you, and made it, feel, like it was more about them as opposed to we couldn't deliver on our promises.
I would just add that in these cases, I wear my project management or program management hat and start with, okay, this is what you need to prepare. These are the prerequisites. This is what, this is part of onboarding. We have certain requirements that you as a customer need to deliver, and try to move away from, and I've been in those situations, try to move away from the promise of whatever number of days for onboarding. And then you find out that the customer usually takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even more to be ready. And then eventually it's manageable. So there are different ways of delivery from a delivery point of view to try and handle those kind of things before you take the sales and tell them that it's their fault.
When you're talking about deal negotiations, back when I was an IC, I was working for a leader who was known as being very, very tough negotiator. And, they basically, what people would say about him is that, he would take advantage of his grandmother if he could in a deal, kind of thing. He didn't have a very good reputation on it. And so I didn't want that then to impact my reputation. However, there were times when I'd go along with what he was suggesting, because what could I do? He was my boss. That's how I thought, right? The problem is that ended up burning me later. I had a very long-standing relationship with someone who found out that she didn't ask about a certain deal point, and because of that, she got a really bad deal. She never trusted our company again, but worse, she didn't trust me again. And so what I started to do was I learned from that, and I started to coach people on the side, my own customers, in that conversation, in those negotiations with my boss, so that I could then say, hey, what do you think about this deal point? What's really going to work for you? What do you think is out there on the marketplace? What are you seeing? And I would suggest these kinds of things, not telling them what to ask for, but at least calling it to their attention, like, hey, by the way, you should look at these deal points. Now, my boss would have been very upset, and he still technically doesn't know, and I'm not saying his name, but he doesn't know that I would literally have to coach our clients in those negotiations, and not all
Yeah.
of them, but a few key ones where I knew it would literally impact their business and their ability to do business in an effective way with us
Yeah.
otherwise, right?
And I think customer success managers with the, let's say, trusted advisor hat and with significant important customers and deals, you can be there also their trusted advisor throughout the process without bypassing your sales, or, you're not doing any negotiation, you're not doing any pricing, but you are just making sure they get what they need. It could be the service level that they need, the SLA that they need, the type of features that maybe were not enabled and can be enabled the next time. And you're just making sure and they get your trust because they know that you are just kind of being there for them.
Right. And Tracy in the chat makes a good point that you're better off when you can have a straightforward conversation with the customer, right? So
Yep.
then what happens if you're working with someone on your team who doesn't follow that approach? And how do you deal with that dilemma, right? And how that was how I dealt with it. How thinking ahead of time, then while you're in the situation, how would you deal with it? Another situation I've seen frequently is as a CS leader, when you're in a board conversation and the CEO is suggesting that you go down a path to, reach some sort of metrics or numbers and whatever, and like you've seen before that this is just not going to work, that this is going to lead to failure. How do you address that situation, right? Where the CEO is suggesting something, the board is asking questions of it, and then the board comes to you and asks your question. Well, what do you think of that? How are you going to deliver on this?
I
And
would say that I don't know. It can that's a really professional challenge, and you put your integrity on the line here because the board members, again, it's a small world. There might be your board members in the next venture. I always believe in transparency, like we do with customers. So transparency has to go a full way. I mean, if we are real professionals. I came across that, and it wasn't in a bad way, but in a startup that I worked with, we changed the way we measured a usage and active users. And that obviously, when from one board meeting to the next, it changed the way we had to report and provide our report. So I immediately went to my CEO and said, we are going to also show them how the new measurements looks based on the previous meeting. So we're not creating
right.
that level of deviation and confusion. So I think the more transparent you
So
are.
right. So the thing is you talk to the CEO ahead of time and said,
Yes.
by the way, this is how I'm going to show
Yeah.
this report, right?
I set the tone. I set
And
the
that
tone
was, but
immediately.
it was also, it's key that you talked to the CEO ahead of time and got on the same page ahead of time in terms of how you're going to handle it. Because what will happen is if you represent, well, I don't see it that way at all. I would go in a completely different way than the CEO. What's going to look like from the board's perspective isn't like, oh, wow, Jan's right. Oh, that's awesome. They're going to be like, the CS leader and the CEO are not on the right,
Another
not on the
line.
same page. They're not aligned. And that's what they're going to see, right? So you have these different kinds of dilemmas about how do you open up a topic with the board, that there might be another way so that you still keep your integrity, but also show that you're still aligned with the CEO, right? So there's
Yeah.
all of these kinds of situations where you have your own integrity, but you also have the integrity of the professionalism, right?
Yeah.
We have one last topic that we wanted to bring up because we just want to throw even more in the mix. And that is in terms of AI and when that comes up. Now that you have data and you also have the bias that AI or the data can represent and or introduce into situations, right? And that can be for your overall product or for your processes. And when you think about that, you know, data, sort of garbage in, garbage out, but also which data are you choosing, right? And which data are you including in the mix can actually influence a bias. Or go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, and my always, it's more of a notion that, you know, we trust technology everywhere. You know, this could be a great thing to use. The data can go and ask ChatGPT different questions. To what extent these answers are, you know, biased themselves, how much they are accurate, how much I trust my own knowledge. I've been in, you know, as I get more experience. So it's again, it's a balance. I want to balance, I want to use technology, I want to leverage technology, but I also want to balance it with, you know, my own professional capabilities at the same time. The metaphor I always use is, we all use SatNav today. We used to look at maps. At least I was used to navigate when I was a tourist, to take a map and find where to go. Today, I'm totally relying on SatNav applications. In the future, I would like not just to be reliant on ChatGPT or other engines to tell me what I need to think or what I need to know. I would like to still be curious about a lot of things.
Yeah. So then we're about to go to breakout sessions, and we hope we're sort of giving you some thoughts about what might come up in those breakout sessions. We want to sort of have bring out the topic of how have you successfully navigated conflicting priorities between teams at your company or between the customer and your company. And then the other topic is, how have you successfully navigated dysfunctional customer organizations in the past? Because that's another thing that comes up. Be sure to grab the breakout session notes there. And I will go ahead and set up some breakout groups. How did it go? How did it go in the rooms? I thought that this would be a really meaty topic.
It's always too short. We
I
need more
know,
time.
and I always try to give more time to the breakouts because of that. So, is Kai Moon back yet? If so,
Yeah, I'm here.
yeah. Oh, I really appreciated in the chat, while you were all in your breakout rooms, I was going through my own little sort of rabbit hole conversation with myself, because you had mentioned Timnit Gebru?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
He's amazing.
yeah, and so then I just added a bunch of other resources. It's all around AI, ethical AI. But I just added some additional posts, and there's also Rafi Krikorian, who has a podcast that interviewed her or him. Sorry, I'm not sure. Anyway, but the person and so anyway, so I just added some more links over to our slides. So if you downloaded them, you might want to download them again. There's some good stuff over there. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'm in a group on Slack if anyone's interested, called All Tech is Human, and it's just
Oh.
about responsible tech. So I can share the link to that.
Yes. Yes, this is exactly why we want to have these conversations, to hear about
Yeah.
resources like that. That's fantastic. Thanks, Kai. Cool. What other kinds of aha moments did anyone have while you were in the last 20 minutes? Because I didn't have a conversation. I just had an aha moment. Sadie?
Yeah.
Mhm.
See me coming off mute.
Mhm.
We had an interesting conversation around these idea of blameless postmortems after a scenario has played out where ultimately it needs improvement. And I just thought it was really interesting, of the 6 women that were in our conversation, only 1 in 6 was regularly having those kinds of conversations within her organization, which seems like a huge miss for the rest of us. Yeah, Tammy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I already told you. I said, you're going to have to bring this one to the group. So I don't know if you want to jump in and add any more color. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Okay, Tammy, let's hear.
thought I had gotten off the hook. Okay. So generally the TLDR, there are a lot of resources. Angelica found one and posted it as well in the chat, but the TLDR in lesson learn is do this in person, have a 20 or 30-minute conversation where you're focused solely on the process and you're talking about what went wrong, where was the breakdown, how do we fix the process going forward. So it's not about you, how you feel, how other people acted. It's all about the process and how we can fix it. And you surface a lot of things, which are maybe there's a lack of process somewhere, and that's fine. But it does help to bring everyone on the same page with reducing the emotional charge in the room.
Wow, love that. Yeah, because sometimes that's where the problems really arise from is the emotions and the attachment and the ego and all of that, right? And so if instead you can just talk about it in terms of process, that can really help everyone. Kimberly.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I threw in at the very end for us were, I guess, leading principles, just, having a sense of empathy. I think where it's easy to kind of villainize people, right? So if something's doing something really unethically, you can be like, oh my God, like they're so terrible, right? But, everybody's a person. So, we all have kind of like the basic, what was that? Nonviolent communication from years ago. Like we all have needs and feelings. And so, and I think the more you can use data, to maybe relate, like if there's another department that has different goals or, like trying to, list out specific examples or like actual numbers and put it in a perspective of how improving this one thing, will actually make their KPIs better or even better, like the whole company's KPIs. That can take some of the emotion out of it. And again, kind of taking that charge out that, you understand that they have difficulties. They're trying to do whatever they can, trying not to assume they're a villain and just trying to like empower them that, hey, this is actually for your own benefit.
Right. Absolutely. Lakshmi.
The only other thing that I wanted to add is in your communication, I think it needs to come off clear that it is you and the other person versus the problem instead of you and the other person in the conflict. So that's a way of saying, hey, you and I are a team. This is the problem. This is how we're going to solve it. I know we both come with a good intention, and there's like an external situation that kind of helps you not think of the other person as the party to blame or yourself as the party to blame. So it's just a way of like getting out of the blame cycle.
Right. Nice. Any other things come up outside of kind of how to take the emotional charge of out of things? Was there any other sort of aha moments that folks wanted to be sure to share? Kat.
I think from a Guy webinar that I had the pleasure of joining before Thanksgiving, there was a comment made about as CS leaders really thinking about like, what will I tolerate for my team or what will I tolerate like on my team? And making sure that as leaders, like we think through some of those things and we support our team in boundary setting and then reinforcing those boundaries. Boundaries are not established one time. They have to be formed up and they have to be like rebuilt over and over again. So thank you, Guy, for that concept.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Guy, was there anything else in that conversation you wanted to be sure to highlight that
you want other to talk or you want me to quickly talk?
If just real quick on those points, was there another quick thing you wanted to mention? Because that was a CS Insider
yes.
similar topic.
There were plenty I can share there. I try to summarize everything in a LinkedIn post. But basically, we talked about similar situation, but from different aspects, from the different experience, what to do, what not to do. I think everyone was in agreement that eventually those situations require, a good mix of, your professionalism with soft skills and understanding, and people mentioned empathy, people mentioned active listening. I called also don't be the hero of the day. I mentioned in the room, try to find the common ground of how to build this partnership or this common objectives. And I think these are the main things to think about when you're trying to resolve difficult situations.
So we'll have to look for the link for the CS Insider webinar and include that and your link for that too. Yeah, we'll put that in. We'll put that in the Slack chat later for folks to reference. Kathy, did you have something?
Yeah, I had an aha moment. We talked about situations where a conflict is not like an honest disagreement, where it's a deliberate attempt by somebody or more than one somebody to torpedo whatever
Yeah.
you're trying to do. And my aha was everyone pretty much agreed that you have to choose with your feet sometimes and leave the company because there's just no way you can fix this because of the power other people have, etc. So
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's or if you find that somebody, when you're trying to like do an onboarding, there's somebody who's resisting, right? Same sort of thing. Or if there's somebody within your company that is sort of, yeah, like you said, torpedoing or trying to resist, right? Like, how do you deal with that? Sometimes you can try to address it, but sometimes it's like, oh, this isn't going to go away. This is the whole point, and this person's getting the support. Then yeah, walk with your feet. Great, Kathy. Ramanya, we have 1 minute, so we'll finish up with you.
Yeah, and I just put a note also in the chat, but we kind of went around not so much like the emotional, like you were saying, and personal interactions, but rather sometimes the need to use as a guide and a value guide the fit of the solution to the customer. That's, I think, like an eternal holy grail situation where you have a lot of these situations where are you underselling, are you overselling being the more frequent one. One situation, another one where it's, are you following the proper channels of engagement and relations, where that may not be perhaps clear to the customer, or someone intentional is not following them. And the third one was, again, sort of a holy grail eternal one, post-sale versus the sales created expectations and the lack of alignment there. Often in our CSM roles, very often of like presenting one face of the customer, of the company to the customer, yet having to correct some of the expectations set when necessary. Yeah,
that one's faced a lot by CSMs for sure. And so thinking about how you can get better alignment, and then also just in that situation,
and empowerment. I mean, it's empowering the sales in many situations versus blaming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a break. We'll be coming back January 2nd. Be sure to, if you haven't joined the LinkedIn group, join it. You'll get updates there. You'll get updates over in the Slack community. Would love to see you all between now and then, and have a lovely holiday and new year. And we'll see you next year.
See you. Happy holidays,
Take
everyone.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks, Guy. Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.